Welcome to the year of mud and mercy. Maybe it's night where you are, maybe your feet are tucked beneath a blanket or your head rests on the soft trust of a pillow. Wherever you are, I hope you'll stay a while. I don't have much to offer but a voice, the kind that drifts like smoke from the corners of memory. If this voice finds you tonight, maybe it was meant to. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories they forgot to write down. I wasn't born in a bed. I was born in straw, damp with mildew, behind the cathedral where the bells never quite sleep. The pigeons saw me first. My mother said they cooed louder when I arrived, though she might have been lying. She lied beautifully, often, like someone who'd rather stitch a warm tale than face the chill of truth. There was no one to cut the cord but her. No midwife, no holy oil. Just her, squatting in the half-dark beside a broken door, whispering old lullabies into a world already full of noise. I never asked her how it felt. Pain wasn't something she talked about, not directly. I learned it later, not in words, but in the way she winced when she moved, or how her smile always seemed to be holding back a wince. The bells rang when I cried. She told me that, too. That my first breath came in time with the clamor of bronze above us. That God noticed. I don't believe her, of course. But sometimes when I hear bells, I still feel like something's beginning or ending. It's hard to tell which. We slept where we could. Sometimes in the nave, behind a thick tapestry of St. Jerome. Sometimes under the scaffolding when the masons went home. There's a kind of safety in places meant for worship. People look past you quicker. They think if you're in God's house, then God must be watching, and they don't have to. My first memory, not the earliest, but the first that stuck, is of cold. Not the bitter, punishing cold of winter wind, but the kind that creeps up from the stone beneath your skin and settles into your bones like it means to stay. I remember my mother pulling me close, her shawl rough against my cheek, whispering stories about a place with soft grass and trees full of warm fruit. I didn't believe her then, either, but I listened. That's what you do when you're hungry, you eat whatever comfort is offered. She taught me to stay small, quiet, still. She said the world wasn't kind to people who made themselves known. I thought that meant we were invisible by choice. Later I learned it was just how the world liked us best, unnoticed. Disposable, I never knew my father. She told me he died in a war, though she never said which one. Maybe it wasn't a war, maybe he just left. I used to imagine he was a knight. Not the shiny kind, a ragged one with rust on his sword and too much mud on his boots. A knight who'd see me one day, crouched behind a barrel or tucked in the shadow of a wall, and recognize something familiar in my eyes. That never happened, of course, but I held on to the hope longer than I'd like to admit. Mornings came with sound. Boots on cobblestone, horse hooves. The distant clang of blacksmith hammers and closer, sharper sounds, coughing, spitting, prayers muttered like apologies. I'd wake to it all, the ache in my belly already there, like a friend who'd slipped into my ribs during the night. My mother would be gone by then, off to find bread or favors or forgiveness, and I'd sit cross-legged in the courtyard watching the world walk past me. Children didn't play with me. Not the baker's boy, not the tailor's twins, not even the orphan with a lazy eye who sometimes threw rocks at rats. I was the kind of child people didn't see unless I was too loud, and then they saw me all at once and not kindly. I learned early that silence was safer. If you didn't speak, they couldn't call you rude. If you didn't beg, they couldn't accuse you of sin. If you didn't look too long, they wouldn't accuse you of staring. So I became the background, a smear of color at the edge of a tapestry. A shadow that moved only when the sun insisted on it. I wasn't sad, not the way you'd think. There's a kind of freedom in being overlooked. You can linger where others are chased away. You can watch. And watching teaches you more than school ever could, not that I'd know. But I saw how the merchant's wife always turned her ring 3 times before she spoke, how the stable boy tucked bread under his shirt when he thought no one was looking. How the priest drank wine alone in the evenings and stared at the altar like he was waiting for something that never came. Sometimes at night my mother would hum. She had a voice like smoke, thin, trailing, but warm. She'd pull me against her side and wrap us both in the same blanket, threadbare and smelling of soot and rosemary. The songs didn't have words, or if they did, they'd long since fallen away, but the tunes stayed. Even now I could hum one, though I don't know what it means. I remember the way her fingers moved when she mended things. She'd find scraps, torn sleeves, fraying hems, bits of rope, and braid them into something useful. "Nothing's ever too broken," she used to say, even when she was. Especially when she was. She coughed often. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone coughed. The air was thick with smoke from the hearths, the stink of horses, the sour breath of rotting wood, but her cough lingered. Grew sharper, and then one day it stopped. Not because she was better, because she was gone. I don't remember that morning. I think my mind tucked it away, somewhere soft and dark. What I remember is after, the quiet, too quiet. The way the air felt hollow. The way the bells sounded wrong, like they were mourning something they didn't understand. No one asked where she went. No one came to find me. The cathedral kept ringing. The people kept walking. And I kept sitting in the same spot, hoping maybe if I didn't move, time would give her back. It didn't. I became a part of the stone, not metaphorically, I mean it. I slept against it, ate beside it, pressed my ear to it when I missed her voice and pretended the echoes were her stories coming back. I think that's when the peace started, not joy, not comfort, but peace, the kind that comes when you stop expecting anything else. When the ache in your belly is just another rhythm. When your name fades from your own mind and all that's left is breath and footsteps and the slow churn of sky above you. I grew older, though I don't remember growing. I just woke up one day and noticed my legs were longer. My hands rougher. My voice no longer startled the birds. I watched other beggars come and go. Some lasted a week, others longer. A few taught me things: how to steal without looking like a thief, how to sleep with one eye open, how to ask for nothing and still be given a little. I never stopped sitting beneath the bell tower. It's where I began, where she ended. Where the world always seemed to pass closest, even if it never touched me. And maybe that's why I'm telling this now, because the bells are still ringing. Because you might hear them too if you listen. Not with your ears, with that part of you that aches without knowing why. The part that remembers lullabies it never learned. The part that curls inward when the wind changes. You don't need to know my name. You already know my story. You've seen me, even if you didn't look. I was the shape on the church step. The hands reaching through mist. The pair of eyes that never blinked when the rain came down. I'm still here. And the bells are still singing. Hunger doesn't begin in the belly. Not really. It starts in the eyes when you spot something that might become food, even if it's not food yet. A shape under burlap, a gleam near a bucket, a corner of something round and soft and vaguely edible peeking out from a crack in the wall. That's where it begins. The ache just follows. In the early days, I thought begging would be the hard part, the asking, the shame of being seen with a hand out, but it wasn't. That part you get used to. What you never quite get used to is the looking, the hunting. The way your brain rewires itself to notice crumbs before it notices kindness, smells before smiles, rats before people. I learned fast, had to. My mother had vanished into the silence she always feared, and I had no one to scold me for picking things up off the street, so I picked, and sniffed, and chewed things I wouldn't name even if I remembered them. Behind the butcher's stall was a good place. Not close to the chopping block where the dogs circled and barked, but further back, near the slop barrel. Every now and then, if I waited long enough, something useful fell. A bone still wet with grease, a rind, a bit of fat no one bothered to peel away. If I was lucky, it came with no shout. If I was less lucky, it came with a boot. I didn't cry when I was kicked. It wasn't the worst part. It was just a part, like the weather. Some days were warmer, some days your ribs got bruised. That's just how it went. You learn who throws scraps with a kind of apology in their eyes and who throws them like they're aiming at a rat, the baker's wife, for example. She never looked me in the face, but she left her back door ajar some mornings. Once, there was a heel of black bread left on the step. I pretended not to see her watching through the shutters. I pretended she hadn't done it on purpose. We both did. It was easier that way. Some scraps had stories. I remember finding a bruised apple beneath the inn's window once. Someone must have thrown it out mid-argument. It tasted like wine and sadness. And once, near the market, a soft onion that had clearly been dropped in haste. I bit into it like it was an apple, cried and laughed at the same time. It was sharp, alive. It burned my mouth and made me feel something real. Rainwater was easier to find. God, in all his silence, was at least generous with that. I'd learned which roofs dripped best, which ledges caught enough to drink from. There was a broken cup, blue, with a chipped rim, left near the tanner's wall. I kept it hidden under a loose stone. When the sky opened, I'd rush to fetch it. That cup tasted of rust and soap and hope. If you haven't sipped water like that, stolen from the sky and caught like a prayer, you don't know what drinking is. It wasn't always noble. I've eaten spoiled cheese and old fish heads and bread so hard it cracked a tooth. I once ate something green that made me sleep for 2 days under a wagon. When I woke up, a dog was sniffing my face like it was wondering whether I was dead enough to chew. I told it I wasn't ready yet. It wagged its tail like it understood. There's a rhythm to hunger if you let it settle. It hums, soft at first, then sharper, then cruel. But if you make it past cruel, something strange happens. You stop feeling it, not because it's gone, because it's become you, like your shadow, like your name if you had one. People think the worst thing is starvation. They're wrong. The worst thing is being fed just enough to keep moving, just enough to keep feeling it. A crust here, a root there. Enough to trick your body into hope again and again until it forgets how to die properly. I made games of it sometimes. Count the chews. Pretend the turnip was an apple. Pretend the mold was spice. If it was bitter, it meant it was strong. If it was sour, it meant it was old, and old things had value. My brain played along because it had nothing better to do. That's the thing about being alone. You get very good at convincing yourself of things. One day a man tossed me half a pie, meat and barley, still warm. I nearly cried. Nearly. Then I saw his eyes. He wasn't giving it to me. He was throwing it away, and I just happened to be near enough to catch it. That stung more than the hunger. The realization that I wasn't being fed, I was being discarded into. Still, I ate it. There was joy too, small ones. The first bite of something soft, the surprise of sugar when you weren't expecting it. A plum once left behind on a merchant's cart. I took it, swallowed it whole. Spat the pit into the mud and laughed like someone had told me a secret. I remember the taste of flour on my tongue when the millers dropped sacks too roughly. The smell of yeast in the morning near the ovens, rising like breath from warm lungs. I remember a girl who gave me a fig, didn't say a word, just placed it in my hand and walked away before anyone could see. It was too sweet. My tongue didn't know what to do with it. Sometimes I'd share, not often. But if another beggar looked hungrier than me, if their eyes had that sunken, collapsing look I'd seen in mine, I'd tear a bit off and pass it to them. No words. Words were too expensive, but they'd nod or grunt or cry, and I'd feel a little more human for a moment, just a little. There were nights I went to bed full, or as full as I got. Those were good nights. My belly tight, the stars close, the straw softer somehow. I'd curl my limbs around myself like a secret and let the warmth from stolen calories rock me to sleep. Those nights felt like victory. Even if I'd earned nothing, found nothing, built nothing, I'd survived another day. That was enough. And there were nights I chewed bark, stole grubs from tree roots, watched pigeons with something darker than hunger in my mind. I never did it, not once, but I thought about it. That's enough shame to carry without action. You don't get to choose your food when you're like me. You just choose whether or not to eat it. And that choice is rarely a choice at all. I used to dream of feasts, not golden platters or tables that bent under roast goose, just a bowl. A real bowl of broth, thick with potato, hot, maybe with salt and bread, not fancy, just soft, still steaming. I dreamed of that more than anything. Even now, when the hunger's long gone, I still think about that bowl. I've never held it, but I've tasted it 1,000 times in my sleep. You may think this life is empty, but it isn't. It's filled with tiny, desperate victories, with the sound of a crust cracking in your teeth, with the feel of warm juice sliding down your throat, with the sight of someone dropping a bit of cheese and not noticing. And when your whole world is built around finding something to eat, every bite becomes a celebration, even if it's rotting, even if it's someone else's trash, even if it tastes like shame. Because food doesn't ask questions, it doesn't judge you for needing it, it doesn't look away, it just is. And when you're me, when you're forgotten, filthy, nameless, that's all you want. Something that doesn't turn from you, something that lets you live one more day. I used to think the statues could see me. The saints, I mean, their eyes never blinked, but I was sure they noticed. That maybe they whispered to one another when the candles burned low. That they knew I was there, the rag under the pew, the breath curled into silence in the corner. But if they saw me, they never said anything. That's the trouble with saints. They're made of stone. You can carve kindness into their faces, smooth the mouths into soft curves, press gold leaf into their halos, but they're still stone. Still cold, still unmoving. I never liked sitting in the front. Too bright, too watched. The churchgoers would wrinkle their noses when I got too close to the altar. So I stayed in the back, near the cracked pillar where no one swept anymore. The floor there was covered in dust and wax drips, and once I found a beetle flipped on its back, legs wriggling like it was trying to pray. I watched it until it stopped. We were alike, I thought, small, upside down, unanswered. The church was a strange kind of shelter. It didn't offer food or warmth, not usually, but it offered place. Somewhere to sit where no one would ask your name. Somewhere you could fold your hands and look like you belonged, even if your knees ached and your stomach muttered curses in the dark. It smelled like wax and old wood and something else, sweat maybe, or sorrow, the kind that gets into the grain of the benches and never leaves. I'd slide into the last row, press my spine against the wall, and let my eyes drift upward to the saints. There was Saint Agnes with her lamb, Saint Bartholomew holding his own flayed skin like a cloak, Saint Sebastian shot full of arrows but somehow serene about it. I tried to mimic their faces once, that soft, surrendered calm. I lasted 4 seconds before a cough bent me in half. There was something comforting about them, in a way. They were always there. They didn't laugh, they didn't pity, they didn't move when I smelled like wet stone and rotting cloth. That was more mercy than most people gave. But the older I got, the more I realized saints are like the rich. They don't look down, they don't have to. Their eyes are fixed on heaven, or the altar, or somewhere just above the heads of people like me. That's how they stay holy, I suppose, by never getting their hands dirty. Never seeing what crawls at their feet. Never noticing the boy curled beneath their robes, praying not for salvation, but for a crust of bread and a place to sleep without rats. I prayed too, of course I did. Not every day. Not like the nuns with their beads and books. But sometimes, when the ache inside me got too loud, I'd fold my hands and mutter whatever scraps of Latin I remembered from my mother. Pater noster, I'd whisper. Panem nostrum, our bread, give us, please. I don't know who I was talking to, probably no one. But the echo felt like company. And sometimes, in the hush between verses, I'd imagine a reply, a warmth, a hand, a voice like soft wind in the rafters saying, "Yes, child, I see you." It never came. The priests didn't like me much. They said nothing, but I could feel it, the way they swept the aisles slower when I was there, as if trying not to stir me. The way they'd place the offering plate out of reach. One of them once left a crust of bread on the bench beside me. I stared at it for a long time, took it, ate it, hated myself for it, but I ate it anyway. I don't blame them. I wouldn't like me either. I looked like a warning, a consequence. A crack in the story they told from the pulpit, that God provides, that the faithful are lifted up. I was the splinter in that tale, the footnote they didn't want read aloud. Still, I came. The church was warm in winter. Warmer, at least. And when the sun came through the stained glass just right, the colors poured over the stone like spilled wine. I'd stretch my legs out when no one was looking, let the reds and blues crawl up my skin, pretend I was wearing something beautiful. There was a woman who knelt near the front every Sunday. Always in the same spot, always with her hands clenched tight like she was wringing out a rag. Her eyes were red more often than not. I watched her from the back row, and once she looked over her shoulder and met my gaze. Just for a second. She didn't look away in disgust. She didn't nod either, just saw me. That was enough. I didn't believe in miracles, still don't, but I believed in silence, and the church had plenty of that. When the mass ended and the people left, rustling their cloaks, muttering about soup and sin, I'd wait. Always wait. Then creep forward, careful not to draw attention, and sit on the cold floor by the altar, watching the candles drip down into stubs. Sometimes I'd talk aloud just to hear my own voice. I'd tell the saints things no one else would listen to, that I missed the sound of my mother humming, that my feet bled, that I once ate a fishbone whole and thought I was going to die, that I didn't want to die, that maybe I wouldn't mind it if it was quiet. The saints never blinked, but they didn't leave. That counts for something. There was one statue I liked best, St. Joseph holding a lily. He looked tired, not holy, not radiant, tired. Like he'd seen too much and loved too hard and hadn't slept in a long time. I'd sit beneath him and tell him about the scraps I'd found that day, a bruised apple, a bit of cheese, a bone that still had flavor in it. I knew it was foolish, but it helped. Talking to stone was better than talking to no one. I never confessed. What would I confess to? That I survived, that I lied about being sick to get bread. That I cursed at the sky when the rain soaked my only dry shirt. The priests would have frowned, told me to repent, but I didn't need forgiveness. I needed to not be hungry. I needed sleep. I needed someone to look at me and not see a problem. I folded my hands anyway. It's what people do in church, not always for God, sometimes just for rhythm or comfort, or because when your hands are busy, your mouth doesn't tremble so much. One day I found a coin on the floor, a small one. Copper, thin and worn, it might have dropped from a purse during collection. I looked around, no one saw. I picked it up, I didn't pray over it, just slipped it into my sleeve and left. I bought bread with it, the whole loaf. Carried it to the riverbank and ate it slowly, watching ducks pick at the weeds. It was dry, beautifully dry. I remember every bite, and I remember the guilt too, not because I stole. Because I took something holy, a coin meant for saints, and used it on someone like me. That's the trick, isn't it? The church teaches you to look up. But you can't eat up, you can't sleep in heaven, you can't warm your bones on promises. And saints may listen, but they don't answer. Not with food, not with blankets, not with anything but stillness. Still, I went back. I always did. Because sometimes you don't need miracles, just space. A roof, a shadow to sit in, a place where your silence doesn't echo back at you like judgment. I still remember the way the floor felt beneath me, smooth in some places, cracked in others. The way the candles popped when they burned low, the sound of robes brushing stone, the hush that fell when the door closed and everyone was gone, and I remember the saints, watching but not watching, present but far, like stars you can't quite believe in, beautiful, cold, and always out of reach. I used to think they could see me, now I think they just didn't want to. Winter doesn't knock, it just arrives like a debt you forgot you owed, collecting interest in your bones. I didn't notice it at first, not really. The leaves had already browned and drifted into piles that no one swept. The days were shorter, yes, and the wind bit a little harder at the wrists, but I'd known colder nights in early spring. I thought we had more time. We always think we have more time. But then one morning the stone was white. Frost crept up the walls of the cathedral like ivy. The barrel I used to drink from had a skin of ice on it, thin as glass, and the old man who usually slept beneath the archway beside me wasn't breathing anymore. I touched his shoulder and it was stiff. He died with his eyes open, staring at the rafters like he'd just seen something worth remembering. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just sat beside him until the priest came and muttered something in Latin, then waved me away like smoke from his sleeve. They didn't bury him. Just wrapped him in canvas and carried him out the side gate. He wasn't even 50, I think. But he looked older than time itself when they took him. That's when I knew winter had begun. It comes quietly like a whisper through the seams of your clothes, and then it stays loud. Loud in your joints, loud in your teeth. Loud in your breath when it leaves you in puffs like ghost stories. The baker locked his door 3 days later. No more scraps, no more warm mist rising from the ovens. Just the slam of the bolt and the sound of his wife coughing through the shutters. They were afraid. Of plague, maybe. Of thieves. Of people like me who carried nothing but need and cold. The ground stopped being ground. It became something else, a hard, unforgiving thing that refused to share its warmth. My blanket, if you could call it that, was no match. It was more memory than fabric, full of holes and prayers. I wrapped it tight around my shoulders anyway, knotting it at the chest like armor. It didn't help, but it gave the illusion of help. That's almost the same. I slept near chimneys when I could, in the alcoves where the smoke curled down and the bricks stayed warm a little longer than the air. I wasn't alone. We huddled together, the forgotten ones, like driftwood drawn to fire. There was a boy with a limp, a woman who never spoke, and a dog we didn't name but who never left. He was ugly. Mangy. His fur matted with old blood and burrs, but when he lay against my spine I could almost sleep. I don't know where he came from. Just that one night he was there, shivering, and I let him press against me without a fight. After that he stayed. We never touched during the day. That was the rule. But at night we belonged to one another. It's strange what comfort looks like when you're cold. It's not fire, not exactly. It's the way steam rises from a cup you didn't expect to be warm. It's fingers brushing yours when they pass you a scrap. It's hearing another body breathing beside you, a slow, wheezy rhythm that lets you know you're not dead yet. I remember the week the snow came. Not a storm, just a soft, steady falling. It coated the rooftops like sugar, turned the market into a hush of white. Children laughed in it. I hated them for that, not deeply, just enough to make me look away. Snow isn't beautiful when your boots are broken. When it melts into the holes in your soles and turns to ice in your socks, it becomes teeth, it gnaws. Every step hurts, not because of distance, but because you carry a chill with you that won't let go. I tried to keep moving that week. Movement creates warmth, they say. I walked circles around the square, counting the pigeons, naming each one like a saint. Saint Greybeak, Saint Limpwing, Saint Softnoise. They were ridiculous names, but the naming helped, gave the day a shape. At night we curled tighter. The dog pressed closer. The boy coughed more. The woman hummed once, just once, and I nearly wept from the sound. It wasn't a tune I recognized. Just something soft, like a lullaby she'd forgotten she remembered. It didn't last, but it lived long enough to settle into the cracks in my ribs and stay there. One morning I woke to find my hands stiff. I couldn't unclench them. I sat for an hour by the churchyard wall, breathing on my fingers, rocking back and forth until the blood returned. They turned purple that winter. Not fully black, not yet, but the color crept in like bruises, and I knew what that meant. Frost doesn't need to kill you fast, it just needs to be patient. The hunger made it worse. You burn hotter when you're fed, but I hadn't eaten in a day and a half, maybe more. I'd stopped counting. I chewed on bark that night, bitter, splintered. It scraped my tongue, but it was something. I drank melted snow from my cupped palms and pretended it was broth. We didn't talk about death. Not really, we just watched the ones who didn't move. And we learned not to ask questions when someone was gone by morning. Sometimes we lit candles, not for their souls, for the light. Light makes the dark less sharp. I remember a man who gave me a scarf, not to wear, just to hold. He placed it in my lap and kept walking. It smelled of rosemary and sweat. I wrapped it around my neck like it meant something. Maybe it did. It stayed warm longer than it should have. I told myself it was magic. That night I didn't shiver as much. Maybe it was kindness. Maybe that was the magic. The worst night was the one when the dog didn't come back. I waited until the stars rose, until the boy beside me muttered something in his sleep, until the woman pulled her shawl up to her nose and turned her back. But the dog didn't come. In the morning, I found him. He was curled behind the barrel near the baker's. His eyes were open. His breath was still. I didn't cry. I just sat down beside him, pressed my hand to his side, and whispered, "I'm sorry." I don't know why. Maybe because I had no food to give him. Maybe because he died alone. Maybe because I'd grown used to him. That was the first time I felt winter in my chest, not just in my limbs or my skin, but deep inside, behind the ribs, between the lungs, a hollow that the cold filled like smoke in a chimney. After that, I stopped moving as much. Just wrapped myself tighter in the rags I had, closed my eyes earlier, tried to drift into sleep before the pain of waking could catch up. And I dreamed of summer. Not real summer, not the heat and dust and flies, but a fake one, the kind you make in your mind when you're shaking too hard to think straight. A summer with soft bread and grass that didn't stab, a summer with the dog alive chasing pigeons, a summer with color. The frost stayed longer that year. Weeks longer. People said it was a curse or a punishment, or that the stars were angry. I didn't care. All I knew was that my breath was visible more often than it wasn't. And my feet stopped feeling things, which was almost a mercy, but I made it, somehow, not because I was stronger, not because I had anything worth saving, just because I curled tighter, sat longer, waited harder. That's all surviving is in the end, waiting harder than the thing that wants you gone. There are worse things than being unseen. I built my whole life on the safety of shadows, on becoming part of the stone, the soot, the blur at the corner of someone's eye. It wasn't cowardice, it was survival. A beggar who draws attention is a beggar who gets kicked, questioned, cleared away. But a beggar who fades, now that's someone who lasts. I knew where to sit. Back against the alley wall, knees drawn up, chin down. Never in the middle of the street, never too close to the merchant stalls, never beneath a noble's window or near a doorway that mattered. You had to study the flow of feet, where they looked, where they didn't, and you lived in the in-between. Most days I wasn't a person. I was something the wind forgot to carry off. But then there was that morning. It was warmer than it should have been. A soft mist clung to the cobblestones, and everything smelled like wet wood and chimney soot. I had tucked myself beneath the cathedral steps, where the stone curved inward just enough to block the wind. My hands were under my armpits, my blanket, if you could still call it that, was wrapped like a bandage around my legs, and my eyes were nearly shut. Not sleeping, just pretending. You do that a lot out here, pretend to sleep, pretend to pray, pretend you don't hear the laughter or the coins clinking out of reach. I heard them before I saw them. The clack of nice shoes, that sharp, even rhythm that says we're not in a hurry because we have nowhere we need to be, and then the rustle of skirts, layered and stiff, too clean for the road. Too loud for humility. A child's voice broke through, high, curious, not whiny, not frightened, just noticing. Why is he sitting there? She couldn't have been more than 6, maybe 5. The kind of small where everything still seems new and full of questions. Her voice pulled at something in me, not because of what she said, but because she said it about me. Like I wasn't there. Like I wasn't real. Like I was a stain on the wall or a pile of laundry left in the rain. I didn't move. I kept my head down, my breath slow. I thought maybe they'd pass, but she didn't. She stared. I felt it before I saw it, that beam of direct, innocent attention, like a candle flame aimed at bare skin. "Why is he dirty?" she asked. Her mother hushed her, softly but with urgency. I heard the edge in her breath. "That's not polite," she said. "Don't look." But the girl kept looking. And then, and this is the part I still think about, the mother looked too, only for a second, only long enough to place her eyes on mine and see me, not glance, not wince, see, and in that moment I wasn't invisible, I was real. It should have felt good, shouldn't it? Recognition. A shared breath in the same world, but it didn't. It felt like a needle through the eye. Because when someone sees you after a long time of not being seen, they don't see you as you imagine yourself. They see you as you are, And in her face, her beautiful, powdered, pinched face, I saw what I looked like: filth, bones, grease on my cheek, a torn shirt that might once have been blue. A body hunched like something wounded and never healed right. She looked away quickly like I'd burned her. And the girl, bless her softness, said, "He looks cold." Her mother tugged her hand harder. "Don't stare," she said again, but the girl turned once more just as they stepped past me, and she smiled. Not a cruel smile, not pity, just something small, something human. I didn't smile back. I couldn't. I sat there long after their footsteps had faded and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'd been seen, and I hated it. You don't understand what that means, probably. You think it's shame I felt. Maybe it was, but it was more than that. It was exposure, the same way a scab feels when it's pulled off too soon. Raw, not ready, I saw myself through their eyes, the girl's wonder, the mother's disgust, and I knew I was both a curiosity and a warning. Something no one wanted to explain. It ruined the rest of the day. The bread I found an hour later tasted like mud. The warm patch of sun I curled into felt like it was watching me. Even the pigeons seemed too loud. That night I slept in a new spot, further back near the tannery where the smell was too sharp for people to linger. I tucked myself deeper into the wall and didn't close my eyes. The truth is, we make peace with being overlooked. We begin to count on it. You can live an entire life that way, a quiet, invisible life where the bruises don't show and the names don't stick. But being noticed, that changes you. It makes you wonder, what do I look like? What do I smell like? How do I sit? How do I sound when I breathe? Am I grotesque? Am I forgettable? Am I a story that mother told to that child later? Don't be like him, he must have made poor choices. Or maybe, that's what happens when people don't work hard. Maybe she didn't say anything. Maybe she just washed her daughter's hands a little harder that evening, and maybe the girl never forgot me. Maybe I was her first encounter with someone on the ground, a living caution. I don't hate her for looking, not anymore. She was only a child. Children stare at everything, but I hated that she saw me. That she reached past the barrier I'd built of stillness, of silence, of smallness, and saw something human. Because I'd worked so hard to forget that. Human means needing things, warmth, love, recognition. Human means loss. When no one looks at you, you don't have to pretend you're worthy of being seen. And when someone does, you start remembering what it was like long ago to be a boy who smiled when someone said his name. A boy who wanted to be liked, who wanted to matter. That's a dangerous memory. It doesn't belong in the bones of a beggar, but it visited me just the same. I think that's why I started hiding more after that day, not from the cold, not from the guards, from the gaze. I sat behind barrels, pulled my blanket tighter, turned my back to the street, because I couldn't bear the thought of another pair of eyes stripping me down to what I really was. Not a monster, not a villain, just a man who no longer resembled one, and maybe that's what hurt most. It was silver, not the dull, rubbed-down kind that changes hands so often it forgets what it's worth, but real silver, bright, clean, the kind of coin that still had sharp edges. The kind someone polished once, lovingly. The kind you don't expect to see rolling across a cobbled street toward your foot. It wasn't mine, but I took it. He didn't notice at first, the man who dropped it. He was tall, hooded, a leather pouch cinched at his hip, so fat with clinking that one missing coin meant nothing to him. He'd fumbled with a basket, tugged a piece of cloth too quick, and there it went, spinning from his fingers like a bird startled into flight. I didn't think, I just moved. My hand darted out before my brain had time to warn me, and there it was in my palm. Cold, heavy, real. I slid it into the fold of my blanket, tucked it deep like a wound I didn't want cleaned, and then I sat there, breathing too shallow as he straightened and walked away. He never looked back, he never knew, and I, for the first time in longer than I could remember, was suddenly rich. That's what it felt like. Ridiculous, isn't it? One coin. Not even gold. But when you live in a world where your currency is pitied glances and half-rotted bread, silver is a miracle. I didn't move for hours. I held it when no one was looking. turned it over in my fingers. It had a face on one side, some king or baron or saint, it didn't matter. His nose was too long, his eyes too proud, the kind of face that doesn't know hunger. The kind of face that gets stamped into metal and passed around like it means something. But it was mine now, and I hated how much I loved it. I didn't rush to spend it. That's the thing no one tells you when you're starving, really starving, and you suddenly have something. You wait. You hold it like a secret. You savor the possibility before you ruin it with choices. I imagined the bread I could buy, a loaf so warm it made my fingers tingle. Cheese, too, real cheese, the kind that bends before it breaks, maybe even stew, hot, meaty stew with grease that floats on top like a promise. I imagined sleeping with a full belly, my hands over my ribs just to feel them push back, but I didn't go to the baker, not right away. Because when you have something you're not meant to have, the whole world feels like it's watching. Every glance becomes a threat, every step feels loud. I walked like a thief, hunched and quick, even though no one was chasing me. The coin burned in my pocket, not literally, of course, but it might as well have. It made me sweat, made me forget how to act. I nodded too much. Smiled too fast. I was trying to pass, I think, as someone who deserved to be where he was. I ended up at a stall on the far side of the square, one I never dared approach before. The butcher's son ran it, a round boy with soft hands and a cruel mouth, but he had food, real food. And when I placed the coin on his wooden slab, he blinked like I'd thrown a stone at his face. "Where'd you get this?" he asked. I didn't answer, just pointed at the meat. He stared at me a beat too long. Then, with a grunt, he took the coin, bit it, shoved it into his apron like it might infect him. He wrapped a thick slice of pork in old cloth, greasy and steaming, and shoved it at me without a word. I didn't thank him, I ran. I ate behind a wall, crouched in the dirt like a rat. No prayers, no ceremony, just teeth and hunger and the drip of grease down my chin. It was the best thing I've ever tasted, and it made me sick, too rich, too much. My stomach, stretched by hope and tight from emptiness, rebelled after the third bite. I threw it up behind a barrel. The smell stayed in my nose for days. It was warm, and then it wasn't. I kept the rest, wrapped tight, ate it slowly over the next day. Cold, yes, but mine, and yet the feeling never went away that someone was coming for me. That the man who dropped the coin would retrace his steps, peer into every alley, find my eyes, and know that I'd be dragged into the square, shown to the guards, to the priests. That the word thief would hang over me louder than any bell. It didn't happen. No one came, but I kept flinching anyway. That's the thing about having something when you've had nothing for so long. It doesn't feel like a blessing, it feels like a setup, a test, like the gods are waiting to see if you'll get too comfortable before they tear it away, and I did get comfortable. For about an hour, I stretched my legs out when I sat, smiled at a dog that passed. I even waved at a boy who'd thrown stones at me once, like I'd forgiven him. Like I was above it now, but the coin was gone, and soon so was the food, and I was me again. Exactly as before. That's what stung the most, how fast it faded, how little it changed. I thought it might unlock something. A new kind of day, a shift. I thought maybe, just maybe, it would start a becoming, but it didn't. I was still dirty, still ignored, still too thin in the wrong places. Still someone shopkeepers watched with narrowed eyes, even after silver. Especially after silver, because I had tasted what I wasn't meant to taste, and it left a kind of rot in me. Not regret, not guilt, but ache, the ache of almost full, almost seen, almost like them, and then nothing. I looked for another coin after that, for days, scanned the ground like it might happen again. It didn't. The man never reappeared, no other pouch spilled. The world closed back up, tight as ever. And me, I kept sitting in my spot, kept curling under my rags. But the dull had been broken, and I hated the shine it left behind. Because now I knew what it felt like to be full, to choose, to buy something. And I knew I couldn't do it again. That's the cruelty of silver. It glimmers, even in memory. It reflects what you could have been, not what you are. And once you've held it, nothing else quite feels real. They think we sleep in gutters, sometimes we do. When the night is too quick and the guards too near and your legs no longer care where they bend, yes, the gutter will do. It cradles your spine like regret. It smells like rot and runoff. It hums with rats and whispers, but it holds you. Other nights are kinder. And by kinder, I mean slightly less cruel. You learn over time where the warmth lives, not where the fire is, but where the heat lingers. Behind the bellows in the smithy, for instance, not the forge itself, they'd never let you near that, but near the back wall, behind the barrels and broken planks. The stone there stayed warm long after the hammering stopped. I slept there a dozen times, maybe more. Never once was I caught. I think the blacksmith knew. I think he left the door unlatched on purpose. And then there was the bakery, not the front, where they watched the flour like it was silver, but the side alley where the chimney's breath touched the wall. I'd curl beside it, arms wrapped around my knees, and let the smell of bread carry me somewhere soft. Smell can feed you, you know, not your body, but the part of you that dreams. I once fell asleep convinced I was chewing. Woke up with a mouth full of straw and a dog licking my face. Sometimes I'd sleep beneath carts, wagons half rotted, wheels leaning like drunks. There was one near the tanner's shed that became my favorite. The canvas top had a tear shaped like a smile, and through it I could watch the stars blink. The boards creaked with the wind, but it was a comforting sound, like a song sung just for me. And once, just once, I slept inside a hollow tree. It was beyond the edge of town, past the barley fields, where the ground turned soft and the crows got louder. I don't remember how I found it. I think I was running from something, maybe a voice, maybe my own thoughts. The trunk was split down the middle, wide enough for a child to squeeze through. And I was thin, thinner than sense. So I wriggled in, curled like a comma, and closed my eyes. It was quiet in there. Damp, yes, moldy, sure, but quiet. And the bark smelled like old things, not death exactly, but time. I dreamed of roots, of being buried, of finally being still. That was a good sleep, not all were. The worst was by the riverbank. I'd lost track of the hour. The town gates had shut, and the rain came down like punishment. I found a patch of reeds and laid beneath them, thinking they might keep the wind off. They didn't. The earth beneath me turned to soup. My cloak soaked through in minutes, and the cold was a different kind, not sharp, not biting, but creeping, like it wanted to become part of you. I woke up covered in sludge, shaking so hard I bit my tongue, blood mixed with mud. I laughed, or tried to. It sounded like choking. That sleep left something behind in me, a heaviness in the knees, a twitch in my fingers that never quite settled. Cold can do that. It doesn't just visit, it stays. I once slept in a church crypt, found the door ajar during a funeral. I waited until the mourners left, then slipped inside. The floor was stone, yes, but dry. Dry counts for more than soft, I've learned. The air was thick with wax and decay. I didn't mind. Death, I thought, wouldn't mind my company. He already knew me. I slept beside a coffin, didn't touch it, just leaned against the wall and let the silence hold me. That night I dreamed nothing, and that was a gift. Most nights, though, I drifted in doorways, on steps, against barrels. Sleep wasn't sleep, not really. It was a pause, a stutter in the ache. The world didn't stop when I closed my eyes. It just kept turning, slower, more distant. Sometimes I slept with one eye open, sometimes with both fists clenched. But always, always with the knowledge that someone might shake me awake or never wake me again. It's strange how your body learns to fold. You find ways to make your limbs disappear. Ankles tucked beneath thighs, hands under arms. Head pressed against shoulder like a bird trying to vanish into its feathers. You become smaller than yourself. And if you're lucky, the dreams come. Not good ones, not fair ones, but dreams. Once I dreamed I was warm, not just warm, sunk in warmth, surrounded by wool and firelight. Someone was singing, I couldn't see them, but their voice curved around me like a blanket. When I woke, I wept. Not loudly, just a tear. One. It froze before it hit the ground. People think we beggars don't sleep. We do, we must. Sleep is the only thing the body demands louder than food. It will take you whether you agree or not. And in sleep we are not poor, we are not hated, we are not cold, not until the dream ends. I once shared a corner with a woman who muttered in her sleep. Not words, just noises. Sounds like birds or broken songs. I tried to mimic them once after she left, but they felt strange in my throat, like someone else's prayers. I've slept beside dying men, women too, children. They breathe slow at first, then slower. Then silence. I never moved them, not because I was afraid, because I didn't want to wake them. Maybe they were dreaming something worth staying in. I've slept on straw, stone, dirt, wood, and once, a pile of discarded cloth that smelled like salt and lemon, probably from the tavern. That night I slept well. And I smelled like someone who used to be loved. That's the thing about sleep. It remembers you, even when no one else does. The ground changes, the air hardens, the world spins on, but sleep still opens its arms, if only briefly. I stopped praying for food a long time ago. But I still pray for sleep, not the kind with eyes fluttering and hands twitching, not the kind full of heat and shadows. I pray for the deep kind. The hush, the nothing, the fold of the world wrapping around you and saying, just for now you can stop. So when you ask where beggars sleep, don't ask it with pity. Ask it with awe, because we sleep everywhere. We sleep in places most people are afraid to walk. We sleep with our backs to the wind and our faces to the stone. We sleep with bones pressing through cloth and mice nibbling the hem. And still we wake. That to me is proof of something holy, not the saints in the windows, not the bells in the tower, but the way a man with nothing can still close his eyes and dream, even if only for a little while, even if the dream is cold. There was a wedding once, I don't know whose, someone rich, I assume, someone with gold threads in their sleeves and music in their blood. I wasn't invited, of course not, but I was close enough to smell it, and that alone was enough to pull me forward like a fish on a line. It began with laughter. The kind that fills streets. Bells rang, flowers were thrown, someone shouted something joyful in a voice that didn't know what it meant to starve. I watched from the alley, feet bare, arms wrapped in the coat I'd found 2 winters before, the one with more holes than fabric. The hall was open that day, too many guests, not enough space. The tables spilled into the courtyard and servants bustled in and out with trays that steamed and dripped and smelled like memory. I crept closer. It was dusk. Shadows made the edges softer. People moved in and out so quickly, no one noticed me. And the tables, oh the tables, linen as white as milk, goblets like jewels, bread stacked like bricks of gold, fruit in bowls the size of basins, glistening in syrup. I saw a fish, whole, baked, its skin flaking back to show white flesh beneath. I saw wine poured so freely it ran down elbows, and then I saw the tablecloth. It hung low. And I, being small and hungry and invisible as I knew how to be, I crawled under. No one stopped me, no one saw. The legs of the guests swayed above me, boots polished, shoes satin-laced. The voices were loud, drunken, joyful, and the floor smelled of spilled drink and dropped sugar and something roasted. I waited until the platters came down, until the eating began, until scraps, glorious, glistening scraps, tumbled from fingers too full to care, and then I reached out. One hand. Slow, trembling. It found a piece of meat, thick, dark, edged in fat, roasted, still warm. I pulled it to my lips before anyone could snatch it back from fate. I don't know what kind it was, lamb, boar, heaven, I didn't care. The juices slid down my throat like silk. The flavor, salty, rich, smoky, burst behind my eyes. I wept, quietly, but I did. That night under that table I tasted the world as it was meant to be. Sweet things followed. A fig rolled too far. A piece of honeyed bread, torn in haste. A cube of soft cheese that stuck to my teeth in a way I didn't want to end. A servant dropped a spoon. When he ducked under to grab it, he saw me. Our eyes met. He didn't speak, didn't shout, he winked. Then he left the spoon on the ground and walked away. 10 minutes later, a napkin fell near me, heavy, folded, concealing something. Inside was a chicken leg. I don't know his name, I don't remember his face, but I remember that wink, that silent, sacrilegious generosity. I stayed there for hours, curled in velvet shadows, listening to toasts and songs and promises I couldn't fathom. I heard the clink of rings, the slosh of poured wine. I heard someone recite a poem about stars and love and bread in that order. And for once I wasn't bitter, I wasn't jealous, I was just full of meat, of warmth, of something close to joy. I slept there too, briefly, my back against a chair leg, my stomach humming like a lullaby. They didn't find me until the very end, when the tables were being cleared and the light had turned to the soft blue of nearly dawn. A boy lifted the cloth and shrieked when he saw me, curled and smiling. They pulled me out, called me names, filthy, rat, thief. I didn't argue. What could I say? I was those things, but I had eaten like a prince. They tossed me into the street, literally. One grabbed my collar, the other my leg, and they swung me like a sack of flour. I hit the mud with a splash and rolled into the gutter, my coat sopping and torn, and I laughed. Laughed like someone who just survived a war and won a single battle. I carried that meal in me for days. I burped it back in the dark and tasted it all over again. The fat, the spice, the salt. I dreamed of that fig, soft, sticky, tasting like summer and sin. And when hunger came again, sharp and sure as always, I met it with a grin. Because I had known something better, and it stayed, not in the belly, that was empty again soon enough, but in the mind, the memory. I've eaten since then, of course, bread, cheese, bone broth, the occasional stolen carrot. But nothing has tasted like that wedding night. Even now, I chew on it when the rats outnumber the crumbs. I let it live on my tongue. I call it the feast, not because of what it was, but because it made me feel, if only briefly, like someone meant to eat well, like someone meant to be. He never told me his name, not once, and I never told him mine. That was the rule, unspoken but understood. Names made things heavier. Names stayed behind when the body went. It was easier to drift nameless through the alleys, through the seasons. Easier to pretend you could just vanish without leaving anything behind to be missed. But still, I think he knew mine, or guessed, or maybe he made one up and whispered it to himself when I wasn't listening. We sat near each other most nights, not too close, just close enough to feel less alone. The space between us was a kind of truce, two ghosts sharing the same fog. He was older, not ancient but older. His hair had turned white, though I don't think he noticed. His eyes were pale, watery. His fingers bent in strange ways, like time had tried to fold him but got tired halfway through. He never begged, not out loud, he just was. He sat with his back to the wall, palms resting on his knees, and stared ahead like he was waiting for something that never arrived. I liked that about him. He didn't take up space. He didn't ask questions. He smelled of tobacco and old wool. His coat was heavier than mine, patched in a dozen places. Once I saw him hand a crust of bread to a dog who wouldn't stop shivering. Just placed it gently on the ground, then looked away so the dog could eat without shame. We never spoke, not really, but we nodded. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes a nod is a whole conversation. He coughed at night. Deep rattling, the kind that starts low and doesn't stop until something inside gives way. I'd wake to it, roll onto my side, and listen until the silence returned. One morning, the silence stayed. It was early, still gray. The city hadn't opened its eyes yet. The bells hadn't rung. My blanket was damp. My fingers stiff. I turned toward him to offer the last bite of a stolen apple, soft, bruised, but sweet enough to count, and he was still, too still, the kind of stillness that isn't sleep. I sat up, waited, watched his chest, nothing. I said nothing, just stared. And then, quietly, I reached out and touched his sleeve. Cold, colder than stone, colder than winter. His eyes were closed, his mouth slightly open as if he'd been about to say something and changed his mind. He was gone, and I didn't know what to do. There's no ritual for us, no procession, no black veils or prayers, just stopping. A body that stops being a body and becomes something to step around. I looked at him for a long time. I thought, absurdly, I should do something. But what? Call a priest. He'd be buried in a ditch. Call the guard. They'd prod him with a stick, wrinkle their noses, and drag him out like spoiled meat. So I sat. Beside him, not touching, just sitting. He had shared this stretch of wall with me for months. He had warmed it with his breath. He had watched the same clouds I had. He had listened to the same drunken songs through the shutters. He had been here. And now he wasn't. It hit me then, how easy it was. How quick, one breath, then none. One blink, then darkness, no trumpet, no warning, just stillness. A few hours later, someone noticed. A merchant passing through. He saw the shape on the ground, muttered something, and fetched a boy to help. They wrapped him in canvas, didn't check his pockets. Didn't close his mouth, just tied the ends and carried him off like laundry. That was it, gone. No one asked who he was. No one asked what he liked, what he feared, whether he had family. The wall was bare again. That night I sat in his place. I don't know why. It wasn't warmer. It didn't smell better. But it still felt like him. I ran my fingers over the stone, hoping, stupidly, to find some trace. An echo, a warmth. But the wall was mute. It held no memory. That scared me. Because I realized in that moment that I would vanish the same way. No marker, no mourning, no story left behind. Just a body wrapped in cloth and forgotten by the next market day. And what terrified me most was how normal it felt, not tragic, just expected. I'd always known I'd die in the open, on stone or straw or soil. I'd always hoped someone would notice. But now I saw, even when they do, they forget by sundown. I wish I knew more about him, his name, his voice, what he'd lost. Whether he once danced, once kissed someone in the rain, once sang to himself when no one listened. But I don't. All I have is the shape he left behind, a dent in the dust, a cough in my dreams. And the memory of a man who nodded once when I shared a piece of bread. That nod meant more to me than 1,000 sermons. I still dream of him sometimes, not as he was old, bent, coughing, but younger. Laughing, wearing something clean, sitting in the sun. I never speak to him in those dreams, but I nod, and he nods back. I tried to leave the city once, just once. It was after he died, the old beggar I told you about, the one who never spoke but nodded like it meant something. His death settled in my ribs like a weight I didn't ask for, and I started waking each day with a new kind of silence inside me. Not the usual kind, not the no one speaks to me kind, but the kind that says, why am I still here? So one morning, before the bells had rung, before the bread carts had rolled into the square, I got up, and I walked, no plan, no destination, just legs and the pull of not this. The gate was open. It always was at that hour before the guards had fully remembered they were guards. I slipped past a yawning boy in armor too big for him. He didn't even look at me. It felt easy, suspiciously easy. Like the world was saying, go ahead, try, see what happens, so I went. The road out of the city bends, gently at first. Then sharply, around a low hill where the grass grows in patches like old hair. I passed a woman carrying sticks. She looked at me, then looked away like she'd seen a ghost who wasn't worth the trouble of fearing. The air smelled different, not better, just different. Less smoke, more damp earth, more green. There was birdsong, too. Not the caged kind that comes from windows, but wild, reckless chirping. Birds who didn't know my name, or maybe they did and just didn't care. I walked all day. Past farms mostly, stone fences, rows of cabbage and onions. A goat blinked at me with a kind of judgment I wasn't prepared for. I didn't beg, I didn't stop. I didn't speak. There was a tree at dusk, broad, bent, half-rotted. I sat beneath it, back pressed to bark, and watched the sky go purple. The stars came slow, like they were deciding whether to show up. My legs ached. My shoes, what was left of them, had peeled open like mouths. I thought for a moment that I might keep going. That I could find some place quieter, kinder, a place where no one knew what I'd become, but I didn't sleep well. The silence was too loud, the grass itched, the cold crept in sooner than I'd expected. I missed the sound of boots on cobblestone. I missed the bells. It rained the second day. Not hard, just a mist that became a drizzle, that became a soaking. I walked through it, no cloak, no cover, just wet fabric clinging to wet skin and the steady drip of 100 tiny regrets. I passed a cottage, smoke curling from the chimney. Light in the window, someone inside laughing. I didn't knock. What would I have said? Hello, I've brought nothing but need. Hello, I am tired of being seen as a stain, so I've come to be yours instead. Freedom isn't the same as welcome. Distance doesn't make you someone else. I kept walking. By noon, I was starving, not in the usual way, not the slow, lived-in ache of daily emptiness. This was sharper, punishing. My legs started trembling. My vision pulsed at the edges. I sat on a rock and thought about going further, but I couldn't name a single place I was going to, only what I was walking from. That's when I knew I wasn't escaping, I was drifting. And the world, the soft, green, sky-wide world, didn't want me either. It didn't have alleys to disappear into. It didn't have stone walls to lean on. It didn't have the anonymity of crowds or the rhythm of people pretending not to see you. Out here, I was just wrong, a patch of soot on clean linen. So I turned around. My feet bled on the way back. I had to tear strips from my shirt and wrap them around my toes. I drank from a ditch. Slept beneath a cart someone had abandoned by a ditch, the wood warped and whispering in the wind. When the city walls came into view again, I felt something I didn't expect. Relief, not joy, never joy. But the kind of relief you feel when you return to a room you hate, but know exactly how to move through. The guards didn't notice me slip in. The streets hadn't changed. The gutter still ran brown. The bakery still smelled like heaven on fire. And the spot I used to sleep, it was empty, waiting for me, like I'd never left. Like the stones remembered my name, even if no one else did. I sat, pulled my knees to my chest, closed my eyes, and for the first time in 2 days I slept. I've thought about that walk a lot since. How far I went, how far I didn't, and what it taught me. That freedom isn't found on the other side of a gate. It's not in fields or hills or air that smells of pine. Freedom, if it exists for people like me, is in dignity, and dignity doesn't come with space. It comes with recognition. And the world out there, lovely as it looked, didn't see me at all. At least here, the stones know the shape of my spine. The alleys echo my footsteps with familiarity. Even the guards grunt at me with the same rhythm. There is misery in being forgotten, but there is something worse in being completely erased. So yes, I came back. I always come back. Because you can't walk far enough to become someone new if the only thing you carry is what the world already threw away. It wasn't the first thing she gave me. The first was an orange, small, firm, wrapped in thin paper like it mattered. She handed it to me one morning just after the rain. I was crouched beside the apothecary's steps, pretending not to shiver, pretending not to watch the baskets go by. Her shoes stopped in front of me. Soft leather, no mud on the soles. She didn't speak. Just bent slightly and offered it to me, resting in her palm like a promise. I stared at it like it might explode, not because it was poisonous, because it was clean, bright, round, whole. I didn't take it right away. That would have been too easy. Too eager, so I just looked up at her, and for the first time in longer than I care to admit, someone was looking down at me without flinching. Her face was pale. Eyes soft, brows drawn as if she'd been thinking about me for longer than the time it took to cross the street. Her hair was tied back under a scarf, one corner damp from the mist. She had a red thread on her wrist, the kind old women wear for luck or protection. It didn't suit her. She said, "It's sweet, I promise." That was it, no pity, no sermon, no bless you child or what a shame. just a soft voice and an offer I didn't understand, so I took it. Nodded. She smiled, small, quick, and walked on. I peeled it slowly later under the overhang by the fishmonger's stall. The skin came off in perfect spirals. My fingers smelled like sunlight for the rest of the day. The second time I saw her, she didn't give me anything. She just sat beside me, not close, but closer than people usually dare. She didn't say a word, just pulled a book from her bag and read quietly. I didn't dare look at her for long. But I watched the way her lips moved slightly with the words, the way her eyes flicked when the page turned. She stayed for maybe 20 minutes, then stood, brushed her skirt, and left. But when she left, she nodded at me. A nod like the old beggar used to give. The kind that said, "I see you." It was the third time she came that broke me. She had a bundle in her hands, wrapped in cloth, tight, neat. I thought it might be bread, or maybe old clothes, the kind rich people give away when the color no longer pleases them. But it wasn't. It was a blanket, not new but clean, soft, the kind with real stitching. The kind that held warmth in its folds like it had a soul. She placed it beside me slowly, like it might startle me if it landed too fast. "I don't need it anymore," she said. I knew that was a lie. She needed it less than I did, sure, but not at all. You don't carry something that carefully if it means nothing to you. I looked at it, then at her. She didn't smile this time. She looked uncertain, sad maybe, not for me, for the fact that one blanket felt like a grand gesture. "Thank you," I said. My voice was cracked from disuse. Dry at the edges, but I said it, and she nodded. Turned, disappeared into the crowd like she'd never been there at all. I didn't unfold it right away. I waited until night, waited until the others were asleep, until the wind stopped pretending to be gentle, until the cold found my fingers and started pulling. Then I opened it, and I cried, not because I was cold, but because I had forgotten what softness felt like. It wasn't just clothes, it was kindness. And kindness, when you haven't felt it in years, hurts more than cruelty ever did. Cruelty is predictable, cold, straightforward, but kindness. Kindness scrapes something awake in you. It whispers, you are still a person, you are still worth something. And that whisper is unbearable when you've worked so hard to believe the opposite. I wrapped myself in it like a secret, like a sin. I didn't show the others, didn't share, I couldn't. It wasn't just warmth. It was proof. Proof that someone had seen me and cared and decided I was worth the effort of staying warm. It made me ache, not in the bones, in the heart, in the parts of me I'd stopped listening to. That night I slept longer than usual, and I dreamed of her, not her face, just her presence. A figure sitting beside me reading, peeling an orange. Placing something down with hands that didn't tremble. I never saw her again. Maybe she moved. Maybe she was a traveler. Maybe she died. That's the thing about mercy. It visits and leaves, and you don't get to ask where it goes. But I kept the blanket for weeks, maybe months. I washed it in the river when it started to sour. I dried it on the stones, combed the threads with a stick. I treated it better than I treated myself, until it was taken. One night while I slept, someone pulled it from my arms. I woke to empty air and an ache I didn't recognize. I never found out who took it, but I didn't chase them, because I understood. They needed it too, and maybe they cried just like I did. Maybe they felt that same unbearable softness, that reminder that somewhere, sometime, someone chose to give instead of look away. Kindness, you see, doesn't last, not in the world I know, but it leaves a bruise. A sweet, slow bruise that never really fades. I'm old now, slower than I used to be. My knees creak like the church doors in winter. My hands shake even when I'm still, and the few teeth I have left don't do much but hum when it's cold, but I'm still here. That alone surprises me. I thought I would have vanished long ago, into the snow, into the mud, into one of those dark alleys that never remembers the faces that pass through it. But somehow I outlasted the winter that took the others. I outlasted the guards who used to shout at me. I even outlasted the bakery fire, though it took the smell of bread with it. The city has grown, I have not. New bricks stacked on old stone. New merchants with new names I don't bother to learn. New children who throw stones with cleaner hands. The streets are louder somehow, or maybe my ears are quieter, but the stones remember me, not in the way people remember. Stones don't whisper your name or leave flowers where you once sat. They just know the weight of your feet, the press of your back, the rhythm of your breath when you fall asleep against them. I've leaned on these walls for longer than some of these houses have stood. I've watched windows be replaced, watched chimneys crumble, watched shops close, then reopen under new signs in letters I can't read. But the gutter still runs the same, the bells still ring. And in the early morning, when the fog is thick and the carts haven't yet begun to roll, I can almost believe the city remembers me. Not with love, not with kindness, but with recognition, like a tree knows the shape of the wind. No one asks my story, not anymore, not that they ever did, but now they don't even wonder. I'm too old to be curious about, too slow to be threatening, too quiet to be interesting. Sometimes I catch my reflection in puddles. It startles me. The folds in my face have deepened into canyons. My hair is mostly gone, save for a few strands that cling to my scalp like stubborn ghosts. My eyes are still mine, though, tired, but watching. I see the boys who used to throw things at me grown now. One owns a stall, sells spices. I watched him kiss his wife once when he thought no one could see. Another joined the city watch. He walks straighter now, still doesn't meet my gaze. That's all right. I wouldn't know what to say if he did. There's a bench I sit on these days, a real bench, wood and iron. It's near the square, just crooked enough that no one important wants it. In the afternoon, it catches a little sun. Enough to warm my back, that's all I need. I sit there and watch the world forget me, not out of cruelty, just naturally. People forget old things, that's what people do, but the bench knows I'm there. The pigeons still gather near my feet. The cracks in the pavement still match the shape of my soles. Once a boy came up to me, small, sharp-eyed, clutching a crust of bread. He offered me a bite. I didn't take it, but I nodded. He grinned and ran off, proud of himself. Somewhere a mother smiled at his kindness, not knowing it made my throat ache, not from hunger, from memory. I remembered another boy. Younger me, sitting just like this, waiting for a miracle. And now I was the old man on the bench, the one people see and forget, the one children are taught not to stare at too long. It should feel like loss, but it doesn't. It feels like shape. Like I've finally become the outline I was always tracing. I've outlived the blankets, the oranges, the coins. Outlived the dog who once warmed my spine. Outlived the whispers of the old priest who used to leave crusts on the window ledge. They're all gone. But I'm still here, a body that made it farther than it should have. Not a hero, not a tale, just breathe and ache. And skin that still shivers when it rains. Sometimes I hum, quietly, a tune I don't remember learning. One my mother might have sung, in a voice I've forgotten but still carry. It helps, not with the pain, that's permanent now, but with the silence. The kind that curls around your ribs when you sit too still. The ground will take me soon, I know that. I can feel the slow hush settling in. Like a story preparing to end, not tragically, not suddenly, just gently, but not yet, not quite yet. Tonight I will sleep beside the chapel wall. The one that still radiates a little heat from the sun, even on cold days. I'll tuck my knees to my chest. I'll pull what's left of my coat around my shoulders. I'll listen to the sounds, boots, wheels, wind, bells, and maybe I'll dream. Maybe I won't, but either way, I'll lie there, breathing like I've always done. And in the morning, when the pigeons scatter and the frost peels from the glass, I'll still be here. Because the stones remember me, they always have. And when I'm gone, when the last breath curls from my lips and the last passerby steps over my feet without noticing, the stones will still hold my shape. Just a little, long enough, until the bells ring again, just like they did the day I arrived.